Hi, welcome back for the It's the Yoga series. And the first topic that I want to bring up is an important one and something that really can affect people's lives. We all deal with this on some level, and for some of us, it becomes disabling at times in life. So I want to answer the question how I see yoga can help with things like anxiety. And I especially get impassioned to share this when I get asked to work with young people and even children who are experiencing anxiety on various levels and feeling really disempowered by it and even scared. So, how I see yoga can help with anxiety. First of all, part of our yoga, more connected approach is going to start with really working with where we're starting from and honoring what seems to be true wherever we're starting from. So if we're taking a look at ourselves and noticing that we are having some anxiety, whether it be in this moment or lately, and whether that's been a chronic thing or just something that comes up sometimes. So here's some how I would say a yoga approach would go with our anxiety is, first of all, this just honoring what's true and even taking it as an indicator, right? From our body, from ourself, from some part of us that we could be listening to. So one of the big shifts with bringing a yoga approach in is that right away we're going to bring in non-judgment and really become more of an observer and a noticer with what seems to be true. And also really willing to get into more of an observing, noticing, and even feeling mode with really checking out what seems to be true. So this is the first piece of the yoga approach, is to really look at what seems to be true, start to be willing to work with and honor what seems to be true on various levels and what might be part of this symptom, this expression, these feelings that are coming up. And the non-judgment right away. So as we start to move into this more listening, noticing, feeling mode, and really just being willing to honor what's true for us, if that may be these feelings of anxiety on whatever level they're at, that the next piece I think that can be helpful is that yoga really reminds us to look at it all as energy, to remember that we're made of energy and that everything in the universe is made of energy. So even those feelings, those sensations that we might call anxiety, are another form of energy that we're experiencing. And so we get to now start to gently, lovingly, in a connected way, in a listening way, in a feeling way, in an honoring way, we get to look at managing that energy and working with those feelings as energy. And yes, even looking at how we can shift those feelings as energy. So I feel like this shift is a really huge piece of how a yoga approach can help. And it can even bring us out of the fear and the judgment about why we may or may not be having those feelings and whether or not it deserves any labels or even any diagnosis. But that is also just an honoring what's true. And of course, whatever we've been doing in the past to soothe our anxiety, we can just also in a yoga way just love ourselves through that and honor when we found things that have worked. And so that's where the non-judgment is important too, with how we have been handling it and what has seemed to work for us. But especially if we know we really want to shift our experience with the feelings of anxiety and maybe even shift the ways we're responding. Like if we are on anti-anxiety meds, which again, in a yoga way, non-judgment's important to honor if that's what's worked for someone. But if you are someone who knows you'd like to get off those meds, then this is part of the shift, I think, that can be helpful. But honoring what's worked, and even if you decided to stay on those meds, that would be okay too, right? So It's all energy. Even those feelings, even those sensations, all energy. And also some sort of indicator, though, right? It's very likely and most surely an indicator of some sort for us about what's happening for us. And often it is related to what we might be thinking about, what we might be focusing on in our mind, in our imaginations, in our lives, and how we're feeling and focusing in our lives. So that becomes a yoga approach to start to look at some of that with some of our things like meditation and the ways we can be just watching the show of our mind more as a practice, as an inquiry, and also as an honoring and a noticing and a loving ourselves through the things that we're starting to notice, because often that anxiety might be about unfelt feelings or unfaced stuff that we've been pushing down. So part of a yoga approach would be to create more time and space to be just listening within and noticing what's true for us, and even having that time and space to love ourselves through some of those things as they start to come up through our work. And then, of course, addressing it all as energy. We've got the psychology that we're starting to look at with what may or may not be related to those feelings of anxiety and ways that we maybe have been focusing or feeling or responding to life or imagining. So we start to look at that in a yoga way, in a loving way, and that's where also things like journaling is a great form of yoga and what I like to bring in as an approach. And also things like appreciation, because it starts to shift our focus of what we're looking at, what we're focusing on, what we're imagining, what we're expecting. So just honing in on that as part of the puzzle. And then, of course, we've got the approaching it all as energy that we can do with some of yoga's other tools, right? We've got the amazing repertoire of possible use of poses and exercises, which really any exercise or pose can be a form of yoga, something that reconnects us. And there are several amazing, wonderful, powerful poses that do have an anti-anxiety effect on the body, on our systems, because part of what we also want to look at is the momentum that maybe has built up, is as we look at this as energy, these feelings, these sensations, these responses. And so part of what we want to do in a yoga approach is go after it in a gentle way as a momentum thing too. So as we're looking at the focus and the feelings with some of our meditation, our journaling, and some of that we can also do during poses and work with breath, some of those tools as we address it as energy, but building in some personalized, just right use of the postures can be a really quick, easy way to shift that momentum and to actually even reset our nervous system more towards calm, so that we're less likely to get to those anxiety peaks. And again, just really addressing it all as energy, that we're using the poses now to manage our energy more like every day. I'm really into daily does it for me and most people I get to work with, but a daily efficient personalized use of some of the poses from yoga that can restore, replenish, reset our nervous systems and really help us manage that energy and give us that place to tune into ourselves more too, to keep doing that inner work that helps us work with what the anxiety may or may not be about. And then, of course, we've got the beautiful tools of breath, which is so powerful. And a lot of people are just intuitively aware that they want to use breath to handle their anxiety, right? A lot of us just know to try that right away, wherever we're at in the anxiety spectrum. But to really start to retrain how we use breath and to use things like slower, longer, relaxing breaths, especially during those poses or anything we're doing, is going to be another beautiful way for us to reset our systems, to manage our energy differently, and to hone our focus and attention and the momentum of it all. And of course, then there's tools like imagination, which is a tool of yoga that we want to remember that's super powerful, and one of those things that most of us are using every day anyways, but often imagining what we don't want. And I'm still learning a lot about this with myself too. So I see that in a yoga way, we really take a look at how we are using imagination and start to use it in a way that's a lot more effective and toward what we do want. And that too can be a way to shift our feelings of anxiety, our reasons to feel anxious, and address it all as energy also. So that could be using imagination to have some visualization that soothes you and centers you, whether it be something like imagining yourself in a cozy, relaxing place, or even things with the mind where you can quiet the mind for a few seconds at a time, like a windshield wipe or a relaxing or a clear sky that can help with momentum and things like what leads to anxiety for some of us. And or just in life, being more aware of how we're picturing things playing out and what we're imagining and focusing on, because often that can be related to our anxiety, right? So you can start to see the expansive way that a yoga approach can come in, and again, very gently, lovingly, honoring what's true, working with what's true, and even what's unique about you, but then also building in ways to gently address that, to shift that, new habits that are going to retrain how you, your body, your mind are responding to life, how you're feeling, and how you're holding that energy, how you're managing that energy. Now, sometimes it may be that we're picking up other people's energy, perhaps, as part of those feelings of anxiety. So this is where these tools are really helpful as well, that whether it's other people's energy or our own, we can start to get more clear on that as we use these inner practices and the awareness. And we can also just work with that energy and do things to let go of stuck energy, free up energy, bring in new energy, all the things we get to do within things like the poses and the use of the breath and just intention and even just knowing it's all energy, and that's how we're addressing it. And then I think a lot of these approaches just help us, perhaps I can hope, to feel less afraid of the anxiety and less likely to think of it as a condition or like a weakness that we have, but more just getting good at reading it as a feeling, as an indicator, as something that we all might feel and experience, and that there's certainly a momentum to it, and that maybe we can play a role in that momentum and find the things that do soothe us and reset us and center us on those various levels. So I love the empowerment of this approach as well, because to me it helps me feel like, we can all kind of start where we're at, but also really allow changes and not get stuck in a perception of ourselves that may be limiting and may be keeping us from living the life that we really want to be living, or being how we want to be in relationships or our projects or in how we're helping the world. So this would be a reason I would think it's a great idea to look at the anxiety in a yoga approach, and maybe that, maybe those feelings of anxiety is part of a disconnected moment, a disconnected feeling. So that's where anything that can reconnect us could be the answer for us. And again, that's going to be unique for you. And that's why I also love to remind that anything can be yoga for you, in addition to the beautiful poses, the breath, the meditation, the even journaling. Also things like walking and dancing and music and nature and anything that reconnects you. Maybe it's painting, maybe it's riding your horse, maybe it's reading, maybe it's drawing, maybe could be anything, playing music. Anything that reconnects us can be part of our yoga, and to see that reconnection can always be the answer would be the most basic of the yoga approach, in my opinion. So anxiety as an indicator, and anxiety as another form of energy, and that we can love ourselves through it and even shift our experience with it as we open up to embracing some of these ways, if we want to. And I would say in that way, it's the yoga that can help with things like anxiety and really shifting that for ourselves. And then starting to just understand that maybe we can get back to this, anxiety is just another feeling that we all might feel sometimes. And as we stay on top of how we're feeling and even manage it all as energy, we can be less likely to have those feelings. But then when we do, we can know it's an indicator and a reminder to look at how we're focusing, how we're thinking, how we're perceiving, how we're imagining, how we're managing our energy, all of that. So isn't that exciting? I think it is. So yeah, it's the yoga if you want it to be, and I'm here to help if you could use any help. So thankful to share this with you. Thanksful, that's a good word. All right.